I've hit top 100 Sorcerer on the arena leaderboards, but I wanted a real challenge. I decided to play each class to Vanquisher completely solo with random teammates. Struggling with the strengths and weaknesses of each class, I have gained an immense amount of knowledge that I'm going to share via this tier list. I may be the first person to have ever done this, and I feel that it gives me a unique perspective that you won't get anywhere else. You may not agree with this tier list, and that's okay. Feel free to share your thoughts below in the comment section. We're going to have a couple assumptions in mind. We're going to assume that you have good gear, like crafted, rare, and epic gear, at least epic weapons, and you have a good understanding of your class, and you're playing it well. You are also queuing solo with random teammates. That means you have no predetermined synergies with your team. You will have to adapt heavily each game to whatever your comp is to ensure you're winning most of your games. Before we get started, if you want to support this channel, consider subscribing and clicking the like button below. It allows you to stay up to date with all my helpful Dark and Darker videos, and it encourages me to make more. Thank you for your support. All right, first up is Barbarian. Barbarian, I'm going to be B tier. The thing about Barbarian is it's extremely map dependent. If you get one of the maps that has very close quarters and not a lot of space to move around, Barbarian becomes extremely powerful. You can just run down that straight hallway and corner the enemies, and then they just get stat checked because your damage and tankiness are much higher than their own, and they have nowhere to run, they can't kite. On the flip side, there's a ton of open maps, and there's a lot of people playing with longbows and range damage, and if they have infinite room to kite around, you don't really have many tools to deal damage from ranged, and you're quite kiteable. This isn't much of a problem if you have teammates that can cover this weakness, but the problem is we're queuing solo, we don't know what our teammates are, so if you don't have teammates to cover this weakness, you don't have a healer to keep you healthy while you push, or you don't have other range classes to provide pressure while you're pushing in, then the enemy team can focus fully on poking you and kiting you, and in a big open room you're not going to be able to get anything done. I will say that playing at the lowest rating, it is pretty effective to just go Felling Axe with Berserker and Morale Boost, and if you land every felling swing, you'll heal up after each kill with Morale Boost, and you can pretty much just chop through all three of them and carry them around. At lower ratings, people also don't really know how to kite very well, so in your placement games, you can probably place relatively high and win quite a few games early on, but as you start climbing a little bit, you're going to run into a lot more competent players that are going to kite you and not just let you run them down for free. Bard is also going to go in B tier. In the past, I probably would have put Bard higher, but now that they've added Purge Shot on Ranger and Spell Predation on Warlock, those two abilities counter Bard really hard because you full buff yourself, and in an instant they can rip off all of your buffs and deal damage proportional to the amount of buffs they pull off of you. So you're pretty much stuck just not buffing yourself. You can give yourself pretty much rousing rhythms, and then that's it. Or you can give yourself all your buffs, but then you can never peek the Warlock in curse range, and then you can't peek the Ranger when his Purge Shot is up either. So you're stuck like hiding for most of the round, and kind of makes you useless. But if they don't have Spell Predation and they don't have Purge Shot, which at the lowest ranks they don't often run it, so then you're quite strong. But just in the off chance that they are running them, and you will run into that much more commonly as you start to climb, it drops Bard down into B tier. If you're running 10 song solo, I would even say it's C tier. I'm putting it at B tier, assuming that you're running 5 spell with Dissonance, and it allows you to dive any of the spellcasters really effectively because you can silence them and then finish them off, ideally with a Rondell, but Rapier is decently strong as well. So Bard would be much higher, but Spell Predation and Purge Shot just screw Bard over way too hard. Cleric is going to be very team dependent, and if you're queuing with a team, Cleric could easily be S tier, but because we're queuing with complete random teammates, and at lower ratings your teammates are not going to be very good normally, I'm going to put Cleric below Barbarian. There's a couple different builds you can do, and I've actually differentiated between the healer build, like pure healer. If you're going pure healer and you're queuing in solo, I'm going to put it down in D tier because you don't know what your teammates are going to be, and you're basically at the whim of how skillful they are. You can heal a bad player back to full health over and over again, but doesn't mean you're going to win the round. You actually have to have competent teammates if you're going to play pure healer and spec fully into magical healing and not do any of the damage yourself. But for the other builds on Cleric, I'm going to put it just below Barbarian. You can either go caster with Judgment, take all the damage spells. Judgment is going to do a lot of damage. Your Holy Strikes are going to do a lot of damage. And honestly, the most powerful spell is going to be Locust Swarm, because they've buffed the scaling on Locust Swarm massively. It does so much damage, and especially at lower ratings, the players don't really understand what's going on because it's a little bit tricky for them, I think, to realize what's happening when they're getting Locust Swarmed. But you can pretty much 100 to 0 most classes if they don't respect your Locust Swarm and they just stand in it and don't immediately run away, because it melts your health bar if you're building full true damage on everything. The reason it's not higher is just because you're a little bit low on spell charges, at least for damage spells. You can only Locust Swarm twice and you're only getting a few Holy Strikes. So you're going to have to likely kite around with Judgment, and then if you're going to be solo carrying, you're going to have to kite for your Judgment cooldown and probably finish people off with your mace as well. So you can't purely kill all three with just your spells in most scenarios. Otherwise, you'd probably be higher. And then alternatively, you can also go more of a tank smite build on Cleric, and that can be quite strong as well. The only issue is that you're going to run into the same problem as Barbarian, where it's very map dependent. If the map is a very small map with close quarters, you're going to completely dominate. It's basically a free win. But if you're in one of the more open maps, you're going to get kited to death before accomplishing anything, at least against competent players. And you don't have the move speed steroid of Rage that Barbarian has to be able to handle that situation. So Fighter, if you were to go 75% PDR, full tank, slow-ish move speed, second wind sprint fighter, you'd probably be down in B tier just because you are so much stronger with a healer, because your effective HP skyrockets when you're getting healed over and over again. And when you're tanky and slow, you're going to get eaten alive by wizards, sorks, and warlocks. And if you're running crossbow instead of longbow, you're not going to have enough pressure and uptime with your range damage to be able to be super effective. But if you are running Weapon Mastery with Longbow and running Demon's Glee Manosphere, you're an absolute powerhouse, and I'm going to put you up in A tier. I'm tempted to go up into S tier, honestly. I was originally thinking A tier, but I think it needs to go higher because you have so much versatility. It doesn't matter which map you play on. Yeah, definitely for Climb to Contender, it's S tier. That build does fall off as you get higher because there are ways to deal with it. Demon's Glee Manosphere is susceptible to being shotgunned by a ranger, for example, and you can be kited by really competent players, especially if they're coordinated. But just playing solo and climbing yourself to Vanquisher, this is easily S tier, because on the long range larger maps, you can just run longbow, and then you have your PDR so that you can outtrade most rangers. Your longbow is going to counter all the spellcasters, and you have a massive advantage running longbow on those wide open maps. And then if you're playing on one of the smaller maps that's much more close quarters, you just pull out your Demon's Glee and Manosphere and run them down just like Barbarian does, except it's better. The way I see Demon's Glee and Manosphere is it's just a felling axe without the downsides, and I'll explain why. Felling axe does a ton of damage, but you have to be super close to them, and you cannot miss, because if you miss a swing on felling, the recovery time is really slow, so you get punished really hard for missing. But you do a ton of damage if you hit every shot, and it can pretty much out DPS almost any weapon, except for Demon's Glee Manosphere. I calculated the damage of my Demon's Glee Manosphere, and it's doing about 48 damage per swing, and I think about 7 of that damage is true, and you can get over 30% action speed, so you're swinging insanely fast. Now the felling axe is probably going to be doing maybe around 60 per hit, but even if you're landing every single swing, you're not hitting nearly as fast as the Demon's Glee is with that 48 damage. It's hitting almost twice as fast, so effectively your DPS is probably around double compared to felling axe, and it doesn't have any of the downsides because you can whiff tons of your rapier swings, but they just keep coming out. You just hold down mouse button, and as long as you're hitting the majority of your hits, it's going to melt anybody who's in front of you. So pure full tank PDR or solos is going to be probably down here, like I said, and Demon's Glee Manosphere Longbow, absolutely disgusting S tier. Almost as good as Ranger with Longbow, and a way better Barbarian, so you get to do everything in every scenario extremely well. And remember, this is for solos. If you're playing with a team, it might even be flipped where PDR Fighter is up here with a healer and a coordinated team. Rogue. I found Rogue much easier to climb with than these three. I'm kind of tempted to put Rogue up into A tier, but the problem is I do think it's more team reliant than some of the other picks. So I'm going to put it down in B tier, because you kind of need your team to be a bit of a threat so that they can distract for you to get a good sneaky engage onto their backline. And also, if they have 3 frontliners, which sometimes happens in Arena, and they don't have any squishy backliners, then it feels a lot worse going with Cutthroat, which is what I think you should run in Arena. Because Cutthroat is just, you can hard carry really hard, because if they have even a single caster, you can pretty much blow them up every fight and they can't react. They can't do anything about it. You just shut their kit off, kill them quickly, and then run away before their team can punish you for it. If you have good teammates, then even if the enemy team sticks to their carries that you're trying to assassinate, it allows your team to freely hit them with range damage because they're scared to go after your team, because as soon as they push, you could assassinate their carry. So it pairs a lot better with range damage than melee damage. So just because of the lack of versatility, it's down in B. But when you have the right team comp in solos for it, and you have half decent teammates, or they have like multiple spellcasters, the game is just so free and so easy with Cutthroat. But yeah, because of the lack of versatility, we're going to go B tier. But Rogue is very strong in Arena. Ever since they added the 2 charges of stealth, you have so much threat and so much uptime on your stealth. So Warlock, if you're playing slow tanky Warlock, which is actually one of the best builds for Arena, probably the best build for Arena, if you have a pre-made team and you're playing around it. In solos, tank Warlock is actually really bad because you need a healer to make it effective. Otherwise, you just get kited and you don't have enough range threat. So we're mainly going to be talking about move speed caster Warlock with Torture Mastery, and I'm going to put it in A tier. It's funny, I tried playing a tank Warlock build for a while, and I felt like I had no impact on the game. I had a real difficulty carrying. Once I switched over to Caster Warlock, I skyrocketed all the way to Vanquisher. Now, part of that is the fact that I am much more skilled with casters, so there's going to be some bias in my own ability, but you can really hard carry games pretty much 1v3 as Caster Warlock because you have a infinite health pool with your Torture Mastery and infinite spell casts. It's very easy if you're playing it well and your spacing is good for you to get 2,000 or more damage dealt and 2,000 or more healing in the same game, and you can pretty much 1v3. But you will have some difficulties on some of those really tight maps that are very small and don't have a lot of space. If they have a healer and or a Barbarian with a ton of HP and magic resist, he can just run you down, force your Phantomize, and then corner you again when your Phantomize is down, and you're pretty much dead. So there are some maps and comps you'll face where you'll just straight up lose, but in most of your games, you can hard carry. The other tricky games are going to be against Rangers on really wide open maps. You're a little bit low range. You're kind of medium range as Caster Warlock, so you have to find ways to get into medium range to apply those curses. But the carry potential is absolutely insane on Caster Warlock. Sorcerer, I'm going to put in A tier as well. Sorcerer is really strong. You can kite out so many classes with Wind Blast, and as long as you can keep stalling, your spells are going to come back up, so you effectively have infinite charges. You will struggle into bows and crossbows pretty heavily, but Flame Wall can help kind of blind them and give your team some space, and Mud Shield can be decent as well at dealing with those bows. But you will find on certain maps that are more longbow favored, there's not a lot you can do because you have to get into mid-range to be able to deal damage, and unlike Warlock, you cannot tank nearly as many arrows as Warlock can, because Warlock, as long as you can land a curse and then duck behind cover, you can pretty much tank, 100 arrows over the course of the round as long as you're not getting bursted, whereas the Sorc has no way to regen his HP. You have to get into mid-range and then try to blow somebody up. But its ability to kite is really strong. Similar problem to Warlock, where if you have really tight close quarters maps, if there's a Barbarian with Iron Will or a fighter with Breakthrough, they can just run at you. You have no tool to get away. You don't have Phantomize like Warlock does. They will just corner you, run you down, and kill you before you can really do anything meaningful. But you have a ton of damage, a ton of AoE damage, so lots of carry potential. Druid, I'm going to put right near Rogue. Panther is similar to Cutthroat Rogue, where you can just absolutely dominate spellcasters. The only issue is it's a little bit harder to catch somebody out of position on Druid because they can see you coming, unlike with Rogue with Invis. But you do have a lot more versatility because you can kill tanks with Bear as long as you're building Hybrid, Strength, and Agi, and then you can blow up all the squishier classes with Panther. The skill ceiling is really high on Druid, so if you're a bad Druid, you're easily gonna have so much difficulty, and if you're a good Druid, you're gonna make it look super easy. But I found for me, Druid's a little bit lower than Rogue. You do have some team utility and some heals for yourself, which is nice, and you do kind of have tools for everything. Like I said, Bear for frontliners and Panther for squishies. But you have to be very careful going into Bear. You can get longsword parried and 2-shot, and you can get 1-shot by Shotgun Ranger when you're in Bear, even from full health. Ranger is pretty damn good into Druid. They can kill you really fast in Panther if they hit their shots, and with Backstep Spear, they can deal with you diving them as Panther really well. So if Ranger wasn't so good into Druid, honestly, it'd probably be higher because it's so good into spellcasters, but it's going to struggle into tanks and Rangers. For the full healer Druid, it's going to be down in D tier because, again, you're just queuing with random teammates. You cannot expect them to carry if you're just healing them. You have to be a carry yourself if you're playing solo and trying to climb. This build though, by the way, healer druid is easily S tier if you have a coordinated team that you're queuing into arena with. But this is a solo tier list. Wizard I'm going to put at the top of S tier. Wizard has so much carry potential. You've got Fire Mastery to counter any healers the enemy team has. You have Magic Missile if you get cornered and they're running you down. You have a ton of spell charges, especially with 10 spell. Overall, high skill ceiling, very high carry potential. You can pretty much do enough damage to 1v3 in most games. The main thing you're going to struggle against is longbows on the longer range maps because your spells are much more effective at mid to close range. If you're getting outranged, that can be an issue. You also get completely destroyed by cutthroat rogues if they ever get on you. Light Orb can help with that, but it's not foolproof. There's lots of ways around it. And Panther Druid completely destroys you. If you're ever in a 1v1 against a Druid, it's pretty much over. There's not a lot you can do. You can try to throw a fireball at them as they're jumping in on you as Panther and try to headshot it. And if they're not building a lot of HP, you might one-shot them. But aside from one-shotting that Panther with a headshot, they're going to get on you, they're going to silence you, it's going to cancel whatever spell you're casting, and by the time you can cast another spell, they've already swiped your legs and you're dead. Okay, finally, S+ tier. Easily the best class to carry with in arena solo is going to be Ranger. I'm going to put it above Fighter. I don't know if you noticed the common theme, but almost all of the classes are countered by Ranger, especially with Purge Shot now. Ranger with Crossbow helps you deal with any sort of PDR because there's so much armor pen. Same with Longbow, has a lot of armor pen too. This is assuming you're running Longbow or Crossbow. If you're running Survival Bow, I don't know, you're going to be somewhere much further down the list, but Crossbow or Longbow and Backstep with Spear and Purge Shot. You counter so many of these classes with it. Shotgun is also really good into certain classes. Shotgun is amazing into Barbarian. It's amazing into Fighter. Really good into Bard as well. But I think Purge Shot and Backstep is probably the most versatile. Purge Shot is going to hard counter any of the buffs that Cleric's going to give their team. It completely counters Bard. It counters Druid and all of their heal over time spells. I think it's worth running. If you want to have a better matchup into Fighter, you can go Longbow with Shotgun just so you can counter the Demon's Glee build. If they ever try to run at you, you just pull out your Shotgun and they don't have a shield to block it. So it pretty much one-shots them from full HP. You're going to counter all the spellcasters. And not only do you dominate at range, but even if they get in close, you've got Shotgun and you've got Spear Backstep to kite them out with. So you pretty much have a tool for everything. Similar to Fighter, you're very versatile where you're very strong up close, you're very strong mid-range, and you're extremely strong at long range. The long range threat from Ranger is outmatched. Again, a lot of it is going to be map dependent. You're going to be most favored on the long range maps that are very wide open and have a lot of space for you to kite and a lot of space for you to poke at the enemies outside of their range of threat. I found Ranger was by far the easiest to climb with. You can deal tons of damage and it doesn't normally feel like when you get onto a certain map you're doomed like it does with a lot of the other classes, but there's a ton of really good maps for Ranger. The most difficult situations for Ranger is going to be when they have a lot of PDR and heals combined. So let's say they've got a PDR fighter, full plate, and they have a cleric who's healing them. At least with a healer druid, you've got that purge shot to cut some of those heals, but you can't do much against the cleric healing. You don't have any anti-heal, and you are going to struggle to do enough burst damage to the PDR fighter, barb, or cleric who's frontlining, and they'll probably be able to walk you down and corner you and finish you off before you can actually do enough damage to kill them through all the heals. That is going to be the main counter and difficult situation as Ranger. But at the lower ratings, you're not going to see a lot of coordination like that. It's just going to be people playing random stuff, and you have such a good matchup into so many of the other classes. This is an easy decision for me, putting Ranger in S tier. Longbow is king on so many of the arena maps, and Crossbow Mastery Ranger is also incredibly strong. Crossbow on Fighter is not as good because you don't have the 50% action speed perk that Ranger has. That's really the perk that turns the crossbow into having as much threat as a longbow, maybe even more threat because of all the armor penetration that you get on it. It's also really gross if you take a windless crossbow with you, and at the beginning of each round, you have a reloaded windless to pull out whenever you want, and you can one-shot any squishy in the head. Under 0, you just turn the arena into a 3v2 right off the bat if you can land a headshot with that windless. You hit the wizard in the head, he's dead, he doesn't survive. Warlock, dead. Sorc, dead. Rogue, dead. And even if you hit any of the tankier characters in the head, you're easily taking off more than half of their health. And if they don't have heals, you pretty much win the round off of that. So main takeaway, as long as you're building damage on whatever class you are and you're not playing purely for heals, it is completely viable to play any class solo to Vanquisher. So as much as I would like to give Iron Mace a hard time for not balancing things, you know, the way I might like, I will give them credit that there wasn't any class that I found was impossible to carry with. There's at least one build for every class you can have a ton of success with in Arena and have very big impact as a solo player without any coordinated teammates. This is all just my opinion off of the hundreds of Arena games I played solo, playing with each class, climbing to Vanquisher, and I'd like to know what your thoughts are in the comments. Now you know the best classes for climbing to Vanquisher while playing solo in Arena, but you probably don't know how to properly build a strong Arena kit. That'd be too long to cover in this video, but don't worry because I've got you covered. I'll be doing a bunch of Arena build guides. Those videos will be linked in the description of this video once they're complete. In the meantime, I have another solution. If you love what I'm doing with this channel, consider joining my Patreon. For my Patreon supporters, I will provide you with a one-on-one session with me to help you build an overpowered Arena kit. There is also a legendary tier if you'd like an additional longer session for coaching to improve your skills and gameplay. For those that are interested, the link is in the description. If that's not your thing, no worries. Your support through subscribing and liking the videos is very much appreciated. Here is another video for you to watch next. See you there.